Now, it's time for Tech Talk, brought to you by Refresh Computers, with your host, David Leavitt.
Welcome to Tech Talk here on WDBO 1073 FM and AM580, Orlando's news and talk. I'm Casey Wright here with David Leavitt, president and founder of Refresh Computer Superstore in Longwood. You can contact them using their free tech support hotline at 407-478-8200. That's 407-478-8200, or you can visit their website at refreshcomputers.net. Check out all the deals, which we'll have in the third segment of today's show. You can also visit their social media pages at Refresh Computers on Facebook and YouTube. Check out their Instagram at Refresh Computers USA. David, good morning. Why don't you tell the good folks at home your hours for your store?
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you again for listening to this edition of Tech Talk with Refresh Computers. I'm David Leavitt, the owner of Refresh Computers and your host for this show. The store hours are Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. and Sundays from 11 a.m. until 5 p.m. So today we are going to talk about the tech topic of the week. We're going to also talk about the repair of the week. We're going to talk about some specials going on in the store. We're going to do our business spotlight later on, thanking businesses who have done business with Refresh Computers. So the first segment is probably one of my favorites, I have to admit.
Mine too, because I learned a lot.
So, because I like enlightening people and it's fun. Today's more of a history lesson, okay? So it's a tech topic of the week, right? And it's about hard drives and solid-state drives. And I want to explain about them in plain English. So people who don't know will have a better understanding of how these things work. And we'll start with the history. So for the sake of this discussion, when I refer to a hard drive, I'm referring to a data storage unit on a computer or laptop with a hard, physically spinning platter. Okay, that was almost a tongue twister. It's a platter that spins and it's a hard drive, right? So, and as I refer to solid-state drives, I'm referring to a drive that has a storage drive that has no physical moving parts. It's all on chips. Mm-hmm. Although there are little microns moving around in between those chips, and we might get into that a little later. So let's cover the history and also explain the technology surrounding the different types of drives and hard drives, from solid-state drives to hard drives, and from PCIe or NVMe drives. So that you hear all kinds of different technology today, and we're going to kind of uncover those for you. So the first commercially used hard drive. You want to guess what year? I know you know what year, Casey, because you see my notes.
I see. Yeah, I was going to guess. I honestly, though, from the date, and I'll let you say it, I wouldn't have guessed that, to be honest with you.
Older or young or sooner?
I think sooner, yeah. I think it was
sooner than you thought.
Than I thought, yeah.
It just shows how fast technology goes. And it was in 1956. And it was made by IBM. It was called the Model 350. Now, the Model 350, right, it stored a whopping 3.75 megabits.
That's nothing. Oh, my God.
Which isn't, compared to terabits.
Terabytes
so
now.
Terabytes, you got gigabyte, you got terabyte, megabyte. So it stored 3.75 megabytes of data on a stack of 52 24-inch disks.
Wow.
So it took all of that, and it was literally the size of two small refrigerators.
It's just crazy to think. I mean, a terabyte nowadays, you can find the size of your pinky. I mean, it's nuts.
Or smaller.
Yeah.
So there were several iterations of hard drive types in between, but let's fast forward to 1983, okay? So that's the year the 3.5-inch hard drive was created by a guy named Finis Conner, and it was commonly known as the Conner drive back then. And he actually founded the company you may have heard of called Seagate, right? So they manufacture today lots of hard drives and solid-state drives. So Finis created this drive because he wanted it portable. He wanted it to be able to have a fast read-write rate and be able to put it inside computers that were starting to become very popular. It came in two sizes, 10 megabyte and 20 megabyte, right? So that was 1983, the 3.5-inch hard drive. So that's the size that goes into your desktop computer. To this day, they still make 3.5-inch hard drives that go inside your computer, different interfaces, which we'll get into, but still the same size, okay? Physical size. So in 1988, 5 years later, the first 2.5-inch laptop-size hard drive was created. And, of course, that was because laptops were coming out and they needed something smaller, right? So it was a 2.5-inch size, and it had a capacity of up to 20 megabytes.
So we're getting there.
So that was 1988. So let's talk a little bit about the cost per gigabyte of storage, right? So in 1960, it cost around $10 million to get a gigabyte of storage.
That's insane.
If you wanted a gigabyte of storage, it was possible back in 1960, but it would cost you $10 million.
Which is crazy because, for reference, like $10 million back then is more than what it is today or what it was thought of as today.
So fast forward 20 years. So by 1980, it was still $200,000 to get a full gigabyte of storage. All right. In 1990, though, it was down to $8,000. So 1990 doesn't sound that long ago, but $8,000 to get a gigabyte of storage is still a lot of money, right? So in 2005, 1 gigabyte of storage, so it fast forwarded, right, for the next 15 years. In 2005, 1 gigabyte of storage was less than $1. And by 2014, it was 3 cents per gigabyte. Cost.
That's crazy. I don't think you can find anything else that dropped that drastically, that quickly.
From $10 million in 1960 to 3 cents per gigabyte.
That's crazy.
Right? So it is pretty crazy. So the modern era of hard drives and personal computers came in 1986 with the introduction of hard drives equipped with what's called an IDE interface. IDE stands for Integrated Drive Electronics. It had a transfer speed, and hard drives are all about transfer speeds. All right, how fast can it get the data to and from the hard drive, to and from the computer, right? To the CPU, to the memory, to everything else going on in the computer, to your screen. So it had a data transfer speed at around 5 megabits per second. So this was the IDE hard drive. This is the one that most of us older folks grew up with, this type of hard drive in their computers. In 2007, the SATA interface was introduced. So it's the same size. So it used a 3.5-inch and the 2.5-inch, but the SATA interface had a much faster data transfer. So that's why it's important to note that the changes in the technology has a lot now to do with the transfer of data, how fast that data can go in between the hard drive and the rest of the computer, right? SATA, by the way, stands for Serial Advanced Technology Attachment. Fancy name.
Big name, yep.
SATA. So, and a SATA, comparatively, so the old IDE, remember, it transferred data at 5 megabits per second. So with the advent of the SATA drive in 2007, it was able to transfer at 150 megabits per second. So a market increase. And this is when the modern era of the computer really started, because the data transfer rate could be so much quicker. Yeah. Right? So this is when computers really started to speed up, even though at that rate, by today's standard, isn't that fast. It's it was definitely fast enough to do a lot of things. Okay. So it made it much faster than the older IDE drives. So the other thing about a SATA, what helped to make the SATA drive is the addition of a green board, or a little circuit board on the drive itself, right? So all of the electronics was no longer to control the hard drive. With the old IDE, the electronics was all on the motherboard and inside the computer. But now you have some controlling mechanism with a little tiny circuit board that's actually attached to the hard drive. That's the SATA. It helps with the SATA interface. So in 2007, SanDisk introduced the first SATA, like I had mentioned, and it had 32 gig of storage, and it was around $500. So for 32 gigabytes of storage, $500 in 2007.
I can't tell. Is that expensive? That's a lot
well, by today's standards, it's
per gigabyte,
outrageous.
right? Yeah, but I guess is the SATA any different than any other storage? Like you can go to any store right now and get a little chip for your
right.
For your camera for 32 gigabytes. It's not going to be $500.
Oh no, let's just be a few
So
dollars.
that is a lot.
But yeah, and SanDisk was the company, SanDisk. You've probably seen that name. So they're the ones that started that, with the SATAs. Okay, so but manufacturers today are still making the old mechanical drive, the one with a spinning platter. They still make them, brand new drives today, because it's still cost effective to do so. So yeah, you can still buy a brand new computer today, and inside will come a brand new mechanical hard drive.
Right.
So the old style 150 megabits per second max is still today is what you're going to get out of those standard hard drives that you find in computers and laptops. So in 2012, the digital storage world kind of turned upside down again with the advent of what's called M.2. All right. So that wasn't too long ago. So the M.2 standard came out in 2012. And so one of the benefits of the M.2 standard is, again, faster connectivity to the motherboard. Remember I said earlier, when it comes to storage devices in your computer, hard drives and stuff, it's all about the transfer rate, right? It's all about how fast it can transfer. And, of course, how much data it can hold. So most computers today come with the M.2 slot. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. But they also may have a 2.5-inch solid-state drive slot that's available. So the M.2 slot is much, much smaller. It's 22 millimeters wide, to be exact. It's a bit less than an inch wide, okay? And the length can vary from 30 millimeters to 110 millimeters, but the most common size is known as the 2280. So if you see or hear of the newer style solid-state drives, the M.2s referred to as 2280s, that means they're 22 inches wide, or 22 millimeters wide and 80 millimeters long.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's then, to complicate things a little bit more.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is all spelled out on our website because I know this is hard to keep up with. If you go to refreshcomputers.net, click on the radio show link there, and inside there you'll see a button to click on, or a line, or there's actually a graph that you can click on, or a graphic, and it'll point you right to all of this that we're explaining right now. So there's two types of M.2. There is SATA. Again, remember the SATA. It's a different connector, but it's still SATA.
Yeah, the original.
It's still the SATA. And there's NVMe.
Which I've heard of.
Okay. So, by the way, NVMe stands for Non-Volatile Memory Express. Like, it's fast. It's really fast. One of the things that makes NVMe's faster is the fact that they are closer to the CPU on the motherboard. Mm-hmm. They there's no cables connecting it. There's a slot that this little M.2 device slides into. It's closer to the CPU, and that relative closeness to the CPU compared to, say, the 2.5-inch SATA that has usually they all have a little cable connecting them, and just that little bit makes a whole big difference. Makes a big difference in transfer speed. So, for example, the standard SATA M.2 can transfer at rates of about 600 megabytes per second. So that's the standard SATA M.2. So that's that little tiny solid-state drive that looks like could be a memory stick or something,
right.
But
yeah,
it's not.
There.
That because it's SATA has its limitations at 600 megabits per second. But so a lot of these same M.2 slots, that's why it's still called an M.2, will take that SATA, but they'll also take an NVMe, depending on how old your computer or laptop is that has that port. All of the newer ones have the NVMe portion, but they can still take the old SATA, right? A lot of them, not all of them. So an NVMe, how fast is an NVMe? So an NVMe, 3,500 megabits per second, right? So we're talking about speeds, and everybody's probably thinking, okay, well, All right, I don't know anything about that. What's the difference? 600 megabytes per second, 3,500 megabytes per second. Earlier, you said back in the beginning it was, maybe 5 megabytes per second. And so what does that mean as far as how much stuff is actually coming on my computer that my computer is actually handling? So I just want you to picture a book, right, that has 111,875 pages,
Jeez.
right? So that's a pretty big book, right? If there's a book that big.
Yes, massive.
All right. I don't know how tall that would be.
Wouldn't fit in here.
But 111,875 page book equivalent, right? At 3,500 megabits per second, it can transfer that much data every second.
And that's insanity.
Every single second. So pretty cool if you think of it in those terms. And then I hope that gives you a visual of being able to understand just how fast that is, and it's incredibly fast.
An incredible explanation of the history and all that stuff. And don't forget, folks, you can go on refreshcomputers.net and read about all of this in which we just deciphered. I definitely am going to have to again after hearing all of it. There's a lot of information to decipher. More Tech Talk coming your way here on WDBO. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Tech Talk here on WDBO 1073 FM and AM580. I'm Casey Wright here with President and founder of Refresh Computers, David Leavitt, out for the Refresh Computer Superstore. You can contact them by using their free tech support hotline at 407-478-8200, 407-478-8200. And David, I believe it's time for the repair of the week.
Yes, every week we like to talk about repair that happened or came in mind, or maybe it's a common type of repair that we do. And this week we are going to talk about data recovery. We just talked about hard drives in the previous segment. And so let's talk about data recovery. All right. So we get several customers every week with failing hard drives. It just happens. If you've ever owned a computer for an extended period of time, which most of you have by now, you've probably experienced a failing hard drive. So some of the hard drives that we get in, they're on their last leg and we're barely able to retrieve data, but a lot of them we are able to a new solid state drive, I might add. Some of the hard drives are completely dead with physical issues like a clicking noise you hear when the drive is in use. So, and by the way, if your hard drive has a clicking noise and you have data on it that needs to be recovered, then it has to be sent to a lab, most likely. And it's very costly process to get data off a platter because they actually have to take the hard drive completely apart,
right,
get to that platter. It's in a lab environment, so there's no contaminants. It's a lot. But the biggest issue pertaining to data recovery is the fact several people have data that they simply cannot do without, but yet they have absolutely no backup. And so that's why I think it's important to mention this as the repair of the week, because if you have a hard drive, which if you have a computer, you do typically, you need a backup of that. So the solution is to always do a cloud backup. That's today's solution. You don't need an external drive. I mean, you could get one and back it up to an external drive if you want to. But the great thing about today's modern cloud backups, I'm talking about Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, Apple iCloud, Dropbox, or any of the other cloud storage utilities that are available. These cloud backups allow you to have a local folder on your computer or laptop that represents all of the folders, subfolders, and files that are not only stored on your computer, but also in the cloud. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you add, change, or delete a file on your computer, it's add, changing, and deleting that on the cloud. So it's just constantly in sync. And, if your computer or laptop is not connected to the internet while you're making changes on your computer or laptop, the next time that you connect to the internet, it just automatically updates.
It's right? Awesome.
You can get free storage. Most people can get away with free storage, or a lot of people can. If not, for $10 a month. Casey, we've had people come in that are accountants. I'm not going to say their name because it's embarrassing. That's, oh my gosh, I got all my data. I got all this data on there. And I got my customer data. My hard drive's failing. And if I lose my hard drive, I'm sunk. It's like, where's your backup?
Get it on the cloud.
So spend that $10 a month or whatever it's going to cost, if it's going to cost you anything, and get that get all that data back up automatically. Once you set it up, it just works. You don't have to do anything fancy. You don't have to say back up. You don't have to do any of that stuff. It just works.
And it's all automatic too, right?
Yes.
I mean, it just saves it like that. And even when you transfer over to a phone, you can transfer all of your information through the cloud as well. All right, folks. Well, we have more deals coming up for you here on Tech Talk right after news, weather, and traffic here on WDBO.
Now, it's time for Tech Talk, brought to you by Refresh Computers, with your host, David Leavitt.
Welcome back to Tech Talk here on WDBO 1073 FM and AM580, Orlando's News and Talk. I'm Casey Wright here with David Leavitt, president and founder of the Refresh Computer Superstore in Longwood. You can contact them by calling their free tech support hotline. Yep, that's free. It's also their store number. It's 407-478-8200, 407-478-8200. It's time for the deals of the week, which you can all find at refreshcomputers.net, or you can visit their Longwood Superstore at 820 East State Road 434 in Longwood, 3.5 miles east of I-4 and 434. David, good morning. Why don't you tell the good folks at home what times they can go in and snatch all these deals?
All right. Well, good morning again, everybody. This is David Leavitt, your host of Tech Talk with Refresh Computers, and the store hours are Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. and every Sunday from 11 a.m. until 5 p.m. That phone number again, I know Casey just gave it out, but I'll repeat it one more time, 407-478-8200. So right now we're going to get into the deals of the week. So what kind of deals do we have at Refresh Computers? Before I get into these deals, I do want to mention that besides computers and laptops, which I'm going to mostly talk about here, in this segment, we have all the accessories you're looking for, every kind of cable, every kind of adapter that you need for your computer, thumb drives, external DVD drives, Casey. A lot of people come in because, they stopped putting DVD drives in computers a few years ago, and but people still have a lot of DVDs, right?
They're still out there, yeah.
So we have a really nice Dell branded, from Dell, external USB drive that will plug into any USB port on any computer. It's like $40. And also write DVDs too, so you can copy onto it. So what kind of deals do we have? We have in the desktop area, we have the Optiplex 9020. This has been a staple for Refresh Computers for the longest time. It's an i7 4th generation, has 8 gig of RAM and a 256 gig solid state drive, a brand new 256 solid state drive, I might add. It actually has a DVD, CD, RW, which is a DVD or CD player and writer. It's a small form factor, meaning it's about 12 inches by 13 inches by about 4 inches. Comes with Windows 10 Home. Casey, that's normally $299.99. You can get it at Refresh Computers for $169.99.
That's an amazing deal.
It's an amazing deal, and it's really, for 95% of people buying computers today, that's all they need.
That is all they need.
That's all they need. Don't need anything fancier than that. But in case you want something fancier than that,
we got more.
We have more, yeah. We're going to talk about them right now. We have the Dell Optiplex 7040. It's an i7, 6th generation. It has 8 gig of RAM and a 256 gig solid state drive. Has a DVD player also. Comes with Windows 10 Pro. And instead of $419.99, it's just $239.99, and that's a super deal, okay? Another super deal is the Dell Optiplex 3040. It's an i5 6th generation. It has a 256 solid-state drive and a 500 gig hard drive for extra storage. So you have 756 gig of storage in there. It's a little mini tower, which is kind of nice. It's about 13 inches by about 12 inches by about 6 inches wide. Mm-hmm. And that one was normally $379.99. It's now $239.99.
I mean, it's incredible nowadays to find anything that's $100 less than what it previously is. So, and we got more. So, folks, this is just part of what we have for today.
Exactly. And these prices, the before price, I might add, was our before price. So
I know.
The original retail price was much higher. So then we have the Dell Optiplex 7060. small form factor, i7, 8th generation. It has a brand new 256 gig solid state drive plus a 500 gig hard drive for extra storage. Comes with Windows 11 Pro, and it's not $629.99. It's just $369.99.
It's nearly $300 off.
Nearly. And it's just a super computer. And this is the computer, the Optiplex 7060. We got a ton of these in too, by the way, which is one of the reasons we're able to sell them at such a great price. This is the computer that'll last you the next 10 years, right? So it's just a great computer. Maybe you want an HP. So we have the HP ProDesk 600 G1 desktop computer. It's an i5 4th generation, has 8 gig of RAM, has a brand new 256 gig solid state drive, and guess what? Also a 500 gig hard drive for extra storage, and has that DVD player in there and writer. Has Windows 10. It was $259. Now it's just $169.99. So just another super deal at Refresh Computers. Okay, so how about some laptops, right? So we have lots of laptops to talk about, starting with some Dells, and we'll end up with some Apple. So we have the Dell Latitude E7250. This is just an awesome Dell Ultrabook, right? It's a 12.3-inch screen, just the right size, very lightweight, but it's a commercial model, so it's built very strong. It has 8 gig of RAM, a brand new 256 gig solid state drive with Windows 10 Pro. It was $339. Now it's just $229.99. And again, this is all the laptop most people need.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Dell Latitude E7470. It's an i7 6th gen, right? So it's 8 gig of RAM, a 256 gig solid state drive with Windows 10 Pro. Was $409.99. Now just $259.99. So how about a touchscreen? So we have the Dell Latitude 5289. It's a 2-in-1 tablet touchscreen. So it has a keyboard, but it also flips over to be like a tablet.
Those are pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Those are really nice. It's an i7 7th gen. We loaded these up with 16 gig of RAM and a 256 gig solid state drive with Windows 10 Pro. Was $499.99. Now just $359.99.
Amazing deal.
Then we have the Dell Latitude 7480 Ultrabook, i7 7th gen. We loaded that one with 16 gig of RAM and a 256 gig solid state drive with Windows 10 Pro. It was $529.99, now just $319.99.
That's incredible. That's again another $200+ discount.
These are all just super deals, and we're able to do these deals because we buy these in bulk, right, from reliable sources.
Mm-hmm.
So people often come in and say, "Oh, will you buy my laptop? I'm getting rid of it." No, we don't. We don't do that. We don't take from consumers whatsoever because, quite frankly, we don't know where it came from.
Right.
So all of our laptops come from sources that we've been dealing with for many years, over a decade in some cases. So how about a Dell Latitude 7490? It's an i7 8th gen. That has 16 gig of RAM and a 256 gig M.2 solid state drive. We'll have a show one day about what the difference between M.2, NVMe, 2.5-inch SATA, and all that. We'll do that one day. But this has an M.2, which is generally a little faster solid state drive. With Windows 11 Pro was $629. Guess what? Just $399.99. We broke that $400 barrier for a Windows 11 Pro commercial grade Dell laptop. It's unheard of.
Now, to the M.2, you mentioned there's obviously differences. Is that a laptop that would be a gaming laptop if we were to classify of all the ones, or does that not characterize?
No, that doesn't care. What makes a gaming laptop more than anything else is the video.
Okay.
Yeah, is a video adapter. A lot of gaming laptops don't use onboard video. They actually have a separate little card.
Gaming card. Yeah. Which I know. I'm just asking for the people that know.
Yeah. But a lot of people listening might not know that.
They don't. Yeah. So the gaming card essentially does what, for those who don't know?
Oh, that speeds up the graphics. So that allows for these really intensive graphic-driven games, realistic looking to work. If you didn't have that video graphics card doing a lot of the video work, the CPU is trying to do it instead, and the CPU just can't handle that. It's just too much.
Right.
You know?
That'll be a whole nother episode.
Yes. So, but however, gaming laptops now have the M.2 slot also.
Okay, so that is also part of it.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what makes it a gaming laptop.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of laptops today have the M.2 slots. So how about some Apple laptops? People are always asking about Apple. And we don't always have Apple laptops because our sources. I mean, remember, I go back to what I said about we don't take trade-ins. We don't take, consumers coming in. Oh, you want to buy my MacBook? No, we can't. We don't. We won't. I mean, we could, but we won't. The sources that we have are, commercial clients. And, there's not a whole lot of commercial clients that use MacBooks.
Right. And Apple themselves, I think you've told me this before, doesn't really resend out computers that were used once before, right? They're not ones to whereas Dell, they're able to send you these, quality, high quality grade, commercial grade computers. Yeah. Apple doesn't do that. When they get their technology back, it kind of just goes away. We don't really see that secondhand very often.
Not as often, but they're out there.
Yeah.
So we're able to get these, because what you have to do with Apple and actually the newer Windows-based computers as well, is you have to make sure it's not what we call domain locked.
Okay.
So in other words, an organization, they may even have that here at Cox Media, where to log into your work computer, you have to log into Cox Media, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a domain lock. So when they get rid of that computer, that serial number, electronic serial number in that computer is tied still to Cox Media. And so somebody at Cox Media, some IT guy, hopefully will have to go in there and release that lock so that the drive can be wiped. Because even if you wipe the drive, you reinstall Windows, you do all this stuff, if it's still locked by Cox Media, then as soon as that laptop hits the internet, it won't let you do anything because it'll want you to sign in to Cox Media.
It makes sense. Yeah.
So anyway, we have to make sure, and Apple was notorious for this kind of behavior by, users locking their own with an Apple ID. And if they don't clear that Apple ID when they get rid of their laptop, it's useless. Mm-hmm. Just useless, downright useless.
Yeah.
So here's some Apple laptops. We have an Apple MacBook Pro 13-inch Retina screen, which is really high definition video. Has an i5 2.7 gigahertz processor, 8 gig of RAM, a 250 gig solid state drive. The Mac OS is 12, which is Monterey. It was $599.99, now just $399.99 while they last. Again, and I'll talk about another one here in a minute, but all of these are available at refreshcomputers.net. Click on the Shop Online button, or Online Store, I think it says now, and you'll go right to the section where you can find all these. Okay. Then we have an Apple MacBook Pro 15-inch. Maybe you want a little larger screen. It also has a Retina display. It's an i7. It has 16 gig of RAM and a 500 gig solid-state drive. It also has Mac OS 12, which is Monterey. It was $699.99, now just $499.99. And these are in stock. The Apple MacBooks are in stock in limited quantities. I'll throw that out there. But as of this radio show this morning, we have them. So if you're interested in one of these, you can go right to the website. Buy it right now. You can click online or in-store pickup as an option instead of paying for shipping, or we can ship it for you. There'll be an option there for shipping it and the cost to do so there on the website.
And don't forget, folks, after the end of the show will be posted on a podcast platforms, which, David, why don't you tell us about the podcast before we go out?
Oh, yeah. So it's important to note that this show in its entirety, right after this show is over, at 9 a.m., will be available on our podcast without commercials, too. So you'll be able to listen to all of these things we talked about, red light ticket cameras, red light camera tickets, whatever.
Whichever it is.
The deals, the deals and the tech tip of the week and all these things. So if you go to refreshcomputers.net, right there at the top, you'll see the podcast link. So click on that. You'll be able to listen to this podcast in its entirety. And we do have chapter marks, by the way. So if you want to go straight to the deals, there'll be a chapter. You can click on that chapter and you go right to the deals. So that kind of thing. So just go there and you'll be able to listen to this show as well as the past several shows. We've been doing this podcast now for, I think this will be the 7th episode, the 7th show that's out there on podcast. And boy, in Casey, it's been a big hit.
I know. I love it.
I'm really
I told
happy.
you that from the beginning. I was like, I love it.
People have been asking me to do this for so long, and probably just didn't have the bandwidth to put the effort into it, honestly. And then I found the bandwidth, and we did it, and it's just wonderful. It's the utility that we use puts it on every single podcast medium out there. So whether it's Spotify, Google, Apple, all these podcast mediums, it's out there. So you can find it in any of them. But if you go to refreshcomputers.net, click on that podcast button at the top, you'll go right to the site that has all the chapters that I talked about. So you can click on it, just go right to a section so you don't have to listen to the whole show if you don't want to.
And if you're listening to us on the podcast right now or live on WDBO, we'll be right back with more Tech Talk here on WDBO. Welcome back to Tech Talk here on WDBO 107.3 FM and AM580, Orlando's News and Talk. I'm Casey, right here with David Leavitt, president and founder of the Refresh Computer Superstore. And David, it's time to give the business spotlights.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to Tech Talk with Refresh Computers. This segment is dedicated to all of the businesses who do business with Refresh Computers, because if you own a small business, you are most likely aware of the fact that it's very important, the business-to-business aspect of your business. Right?
Absolutely.
So here are businesses that have visited Refresh Computers just this past week, and we want to say a special thank you to all of them. Green Solutions of Florida. They are a Longwood-based renewable energy company. Pretty cool company, longtime customer of Refresh Computers. This week they purchased several computers and cables from us. Carter Water Systems. They purchased several computers. They are located in Longwood. We have AG Fox Firearms Incorporated. They are a gun shop over in Flagler Beach. Yes, we have customers coming from everywhere.
Yeah.
And they purchased the Dell Windows 11, the Dell Optiplex Windows 11 computer that we have. We have a special on right now for $369.99. with an extended warranty and an external DVD RW drive. We had another longtime customer, New Smile Dentistry, with locations in Altamont Springs and Winter Springs. They purchased a tablet computer from us this past week. And then we also had Professional Liability Services Incorporated. They're an insurance agency in Longwood. They purchased one of the Dell Optiplex computers that we mentioned earlier. The Florida Division of Blind Services, we bring them up all the time because they're always buying computers and laptops from Refresh Computers. They've purchased one of our Dell Outlet 24-inch LCD monitors. Park Pet Suites, P-A-R-C, Pet Suites. Cool name for a cool business. They are a pet boarding service located in Longwood. They purchased our Dell Optiplex 7060. That's the Windows 11 computer that we have on special for $369.99. Mm-hmm. Another longtime customer is PLC Construction. They had us come out to their location and add some RAM to one of their computers. Commercial Metal Plastics and Graphics, located in Orlando. They had an iMac repaired and upgraded to a 1 terabyte solid-state drive. Claremont Jewelers purchased one of our Dell Outlet computers and also a wireless keyboard and mouse. Thank you, Claremont Jewelers. Pharmacy Specialists. They purchased one of our Dell Optiplex 7060 computers, Windows 11, and upgraded it to a 2 terabyte NVMe solid-state drive. We were just talking about the NVMe drives. And we have these drives for every type of computer, by the way. So we have the 2.5-inch solid-state drives that we were talking about earlier. We have the NVMe drives and everything from 128 gigabyte to 2 terabytes in stock in the store. So if you buy a computer from Refresh Computers, by the way, and you want to upgrade the memory or the solid-state drive, we have it in stock, right? And we can do that for you. And you can go to refreshcomputers.net, click on the shop button, And right there, you will be able to shop for hundreds of different computers and laptops. You can sort by least cost if you want to, but also you can now purchase your extra solid-state drives, memory, all of that right there on the website. Cables, it's all out there, folks. Refreshcomputers.net. Click on the shop button. And before we wrap things up today, I want to make sure that everybody knows that we have a podcast now. So this show is on a podcast. Go to refreshcomputers.net. Click on the podcast link at the top. You will be able to hear the entirety of this show without commercials starting at 9 a.m., which is right after the show ends. So this is David Leavitt with Refresh Computers. We do appreciate you listening in to another edition of Tech Talk. We will see you next week.